I have literally heard congressional staffers say, oh, my boss can't criticize Soros. He'll drop a money bomb in our next election. If you're Zuckerberg or Gates or Soros or whatnot, you write a check to one of those nonprofits, or maybe multiple nonprofits. And then at the base of the pyramid, you have what you see, what the ordinary American sees, and that is hundreds and hundreds of fake groups like Secure Michigan Elections, Floridians for a Fair Shake, Keep Iowa Healthy. So we're not writing you a check. We'll give you credits for your local Department of Elections to help you, and we'll give you improvement plans. Sean, don't you want an improvement plan for your office there?
All right. Welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. Have you ever wondered what people mean when they use the word dark money, where it's coming from, how much we're talking about? Because we're talking about billions of dollars influencing our politics and our policy. We're talking about George Soros. We're talking about the Rockefellers. We're talking about the Ford family. We're talking about Warren Buffett and the Gates. And I'm about to expose it all. Bookmark this, share it, because you are going to want to make sure that you take in every minute of the following show. We're pulling back the curtain on dark money. There's a brand new book out by Scott Walter. He is the president of the Capital Research Center, called Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. We're going to get into it with him right after we hear from one of our sponsors. Sit back and get ready. All right, I don't mean to put you in a bad mood, but let me ask you a question. Do you owe back taxes? Because the pandemic relief is over now. And I think if you've been following Congress and what the Democrats have done, they've hired thousands of new IRS agents, and they are sending 5 million of our fellow Americans what they call pay up letters to those who have unfiled taxes or balances owed. But don't waive your rights and just speak to anyone. You're not alone. You've got a friend in the Tax Network USA. They are a trusted tax relief firm that has saved over $1 billion in back taxes for clients who owed money, and they can help you secure the best deal possible. So whether you owe $100,000, $10,000, or $10 million, they can help. If it's business or personal, they can help. Call the folks at the Tax Network USA right now. Call them at 800-245-6000 for a private free consultation on your circumstances, or visit them at tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. It's a free private consultation to figure out what your needs are. Check them out right now. Scott, welcome to the show. I'm excited because, frankly, I've been waiting for somebody to break down this massive web, and your book does it in unbelievable fashion. So congratulations on that. And I'm really excited to kind of dive into this because we hear the term dark money all the time. And I think for a reason. Once I started reading your book, I was like watching the ball bounce all over the place, realizing that it's dark for a lot of reasons, partially because it seems like a group like Arabella structures it that way. They don't want you to find out what's happening.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, half the genius of it is that it becomes ever more difficult to figure out who's doing what, and the origins of all this does get obscured.
All right, so let's kind of walk through this methodically, and I don't even know that I would say logically, because I kept, every time I was reading a different segment, I wrote something down about, I want to get into that. So let's just start with, just to give people a sense of the dollar amount that we're talking about right now. How much do these groups control in the politics and policy space?
Well, let's do it by a couple of election cycles. In the 2020 cycle, so that's 19 and 20, Arabella's nonprofits took in $2.4 billion. That is $1 billion more than the DNC plus the RNC. And then in 22, you might think, well, that's an off year, so they probably went down a little. Wrong. They went to $3 billion in the nonprofit revenues, which is more than the DNC, the RNC, the Republican House and Senate committees, the Democrat House and Senate committees. You got to throw another $500 million on to get to $3 billion.
All right. So This is what I want people to understand. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. So let's go to the who and the what and the where. So start by explaining, what is Arabella Advisors?
Sure. I think the easiest way to understand this is if you think about a pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid, you have Arabella Advisors, which is a for profit PR consulting company, Beltway Bandit, as they say in DC, right? It creates and operates the rest of the pyramid going down. In the middle of the pyramid, you have a half dozen nonprofits, both C3 charities and C4 political nonprofits. And that's where the money goes in, right? If you're Zuckerberg or Gates or Soros or whatnot, you write a check to one of those nonprofits, or maybe multiple nonprofits. And then at the base of the pyramid, you have what you see, what the ordinary American sees, and that is hundreds and hundreds of fake groups like Secure Michigan Elections, Floridians for a Fair Shake, Keep Iowa Healthy.
Who doesn't love Iowa keeping healthy? I mean, that's a beautiful thing. When I'm reading the book and I'm looking at some of these groups that you describe, I think you call them, is this the same as pop-up groups?
Yes.
Okay. I just thought there's not a group that you don't like. It's like Strong America, Defending Justice. And you're like, I love justice. I'll defend it. I mean, they get the perfect names. Who could not like them? So walk me through. It's that. And by the way, I just want people to understand the structure that you said, which is so beautiful. It's a for-profit company, Arabella Advisors, that then springs up nonprofits who I assume all have to use the for-profit company, right?
Well, theoretically they don't have to, but
Sure.
somehow they do.
Yeah, it's just
right?
randomly convenient. All right, so tell me, how did this all happen? I think we hear about dark money, et cetera. How did it come to be? How did Arabella Advisors pop up?
Well, it dates back to 2005, when you had a fellow who had been, at the League of Conservation Voters and the Clinton Interior Department and some things like that. And he came from a wealthy family. His parents, when he was a relatively young man, they sold the family business, which of course was connected to fossil fuels. You have to love it. Auto parts business. That was sold for hundreds of millions of dollars when he was pretty young. And that was sort of his first entree into the philanthropy world. Now, in 2005...
This is Eric Kessler that you're talking about,
sorry,
right?
Eric Kessler is the guy's name, yes.
Okay.
And he was, by the way, folks like this always get radicalized in like late high school, college. He was radicalized by an environmentalist guru when he was an undergraduate in Colorado. And in fact, the guy who founded League of Conservation Voters, who was a really twisted guy, although a very prominent environmentalist. So he gets it started in 2005 and initially just has one nonprofit. And the first year that it starts to get, break out is 2008. That's when it first, the nonprofit first broke the $1 million barrier. He had 1.7 million in revenues for the nonprofit in 2008. And 1 million of the 1.7 came from one sugar daddy, Hansjörg Wyss, a Swiss foreign national who should not be meddling in our politics, but has been a sugar daddy to Arabella to the present day. He's put in over $250 million over these years into the Arabella network.
I was going to get to him later, but I think what you're touching on is so fascinating because Hans from Switzerland could not put in money to a federal campaign, but this is the back door to him influencing America, right?
Well, you got to be careful. Actually, if you go to the FEC database and you look up old Hansjörg, you'll see that he put in over $100,000 in hard dollar donations, which, yes, is completely illegal.
Whoa. So hold on.
Yeah.
I didn't even. How is that? I mean, if he's putting his name, why are someone going to jail then?
Because the statute of limitations had expired before he caught that.
No way.
Let me throw names out for you. He gave money to Friends of Dick Durbin. He gave money to a then Representative Udall and a then Representative Inslee, who of course is now Washington State Governor Inslee.
But they did this in plain sight. I mean, they're putting the name on the thing.
He obviously was not paying enough money for the lawyers because the lawyers would have said, no, no, no. But eventually they got smart enough to stop this. And now he gives hundreds of millions to the Arabella nonprofits.
Just
Oh, and by the way, $250 million to other nonprofits outside of Arabella's network.
so this guy just found the most beautiful back door into to influencing our elections and our policy. Do you know how they got connected?
Probably. I don't know for certain, but the most likely answer is when Kessler was at the Department of Interior under a former environmentalist but turned Interior Secretary. There also was working at Interior a woman named Molly McCusick. And quite likely that has something to do with this because within a few years, McCusick is running Wyss's private foundation, the Wyss Foundation, and his C4 dark money group, now called the Burger Action Fund.
So you talk about this radicalization. The thing that I find fascinating about this story is that Kessler is not it doesn't appear to be anyway, from your telling of it in the book, some like connected dude. He comes up with this idea. He knows a couple of the right people, and then he just gets them to buy into this concept. Is that right? Like, what is this? Is this a brilliant scheme, or is he that radicalized that he identifies with them?
Well, I think the answer is that it was a very ingenious way to operate things. Now, it's not even then, it was not the only thing that had ever tried something like this. Berman and Company, where I know folks and is, conservative / libertarian sort of PR firm, they had a somewhat similar thing, but they've never grown to this gigantic size that the Arabella network did.
Okay, so he gets Hans to give him like his first $1 million. He's got his PR firm. How does it walk me through the growth? Like, do they pick an issue? Is it one of the, like you talk about him being radicalized? Is he saying, let's go after natural resources or agriculture? What is the initial focus that they're going with at this point?
Well, again, he had been, a functionary in the Interior Department, which is one of the central spots for enviros to try to influence public policy. And he himself was radicalized by an environmentalist. So initially, most of the stuff was environmental related. One of the very, very first things that they seem to ever have done, and it's so classic because it's so obnoxious. Out in Montana, there are guys who like to drive, ATVs and motorcycles in the trails in the beautiful woods, right?
Sure.
So, and there's a little bit of money that goes to maintaining those trails and whatnot. Well, Arabella may have been their first campaign. Certainly, one of the first campaigns was to go and harass these people and to try to monkey with the little, state funds that went into keeping the trails together. Now, this is so funny because what kind of weirdo on the East Coast lies awake at night worried about the guys driving the ATVs in the backwoods of Montana, right? Do the people in the backwoods of Montana show up in the Upper East Side and harass Jane Meyer at New Yorker cocktail parties where she talks about dark money? I don't think so.
But it does get to this point that, like, why does a guy like this obsess about people on an ATV on a trail? Like, that's like, is it in his mind that these are bad now? We've got to preserve the environment. We can't let the ATVs out there. I mean, is that what we're talking? He wants to ban them, and this is where it goes.
It's not terribly clear what exactly they were trying to do, but they were doing it in the name of protecting the environment. Okay. That is true.
If you are concerned about the economy, concerned about your future, do what I'm doing. Invest in gold. I invested in gold and silver, and you're getting hit up from everybody. I mean, Costco's gotten in on the gold business. But the beautiful thing is my friends at Bishop Gold Group can put a plan together for you. I had a phone call with them. I called them at 844-984-1616. But even better, go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, SEAN, SEAN, bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, and you will get a special gift by having that conversation with them. Trust me when I tell you that when I wanted to diversify my investments, I looked at all of these different groups that you could be doing business with and realized that the people at Bishop Gold Group are full of integrity, knowledge, and trust. And they walked me through a perfect plan for me. So if you've got an old 401k or an IRA, or maybe you just want to diversify your investments, the folks at bishopgoldgroup.com are the people that I trusted. And you hear about why gold and silver and other precious metals are the perfect add to your investment strategy. Don't wait. Go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean and get in on the gold rush, folks. So how does it go from that? I mean, we're now still in the single digits of millions with a big Swiss donor. How does this thing start to mushroom?
Well, again, we're already up to '08, right? And by the time we discovered them, it was 10 years later in 2018. And by that point, their revenues had zoomed upward to $750 million a year in the nonprofits. So, this is just stunning growth. And I think it's because, it was such a smart system. And obviously, he must be a great salesman, right?
I was going to get to that. I gotta ask you, but let's just back it up a step. Nonprofits have to file what the IRS calls 990s. And when you look at a 990, and you can go to a website called GuideStar, and you pick any nonprofit, the Boy Scouts, your local nonprofit, they have to file a 990, and you can see how much the top people get paid, what their top vendors are. Are these guys filing 990s? Is that how you're able to peel back the onion?
They are, but the thing to remember, go back to that pyramid, right?
Okay.
It's the middle of the pyramid, the half dozen nonprofits. They file 990s, but each one of those nonprofits creates dozens, or in some cases, hundreds of the little fake groups. So what you see as the fake group, it does not file a 990. Only those mid-level umbrella nonprofits, I call them, that have all these little groups hanging off of them. Now, when you combine all those little groups together for one of the nonprofits, then, it evaporates, it agglomerates and obscures, how much did Demand Justice spend on fundraising? What about Keep Iowa Healthy? Who was their top employee? Who was their big vendor? All these things you don't know.
So, and that's intentional, right? That's to hide all of this.
They would like to say that it's for efficiency's sake, but it efficiently hides a lot.
So this gets back to, okay, now I want to get into, you're talking about this guy, Scott Kessler, I'm sorry.
Eric
Kessler, as a salesman. So he's got Hans, he's starting to build this thing. And then I mentioned this at the outset in the introduction, but we're talking about Gates, Buffett, Rockefeller, Ford. These are big names. I can't imagine when you go to them that they just hand out money. So this goes to your notion of being a good salesman. He starts to bring in these big, heavy players to fund stuff.
Yes, but I always think it's a combination, right? I mean, for any business, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, you have to have a good product, which is either a good or a service, and then you have to market it well. And, by all accounts, he did well at both things, right? He had a good product, which is here, we can pop these entities into existence when you need them and get rid of them when you're done with them. And then he had to be selling it well. Because stop and think. Here's how you're a billionaire for a moment, Sean. You
Sure.
walk through, nice thought, I know. So you walk through the front door at Arabella Advisors, and you're a billionaire. Typically it's gonna be either geographically focused, or it's gonna be issue focused. Like, I really care about abortion. I want to fight on abortion,
Right.
or I really want to take over North Carolina. Right? I want to flood the zone in North Carolina politically. Well, you walk through that door and you talk to the Arabella Advisors folks, and they go, "That's great, Sean. We can do this. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to set up a matched pair of a C3 charity, quote unquote, legally speaking, and a C4, right? The political nonprofit like the NRA or League of Conservation Voters, right? We're going to give you a matched pair of them. Women for Abortion and Women for Abortion Action Fund.
Okay.
And now, if you were doing this the old fashioned way, you'd have to go find a nonprofit lawyer and you'd have to incorporate probably in Delaware, and you'd have to find a few people to be on the board of directors, and they'd file those papers. And then for a C3 charity, they would have to go and apply to the IRS and wait 6 months, 10 months, 12 months to get it recognized as a nonprofit, right? All that. No. None of that crap. You walk through the door, and that afternoon, all Arabella has to do is create a new accounting code in one of those umbrella C3s and an umbrella C4. Bang. You exist.
So they really, this is an economy of efficiencies, right? They're basically saying, So I've never thought about, until I read your book, I never thought about some of these foundations in a political sense. Obviously, George Soros is in a category of his own. But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Warren Buffett, is this a way, in your opinion, of using Arabella advisors to pursue their personal agenda? Because I'm reading some of the stuff, maybe we can get into it in a second, but I was like, wow, I didn't realize how much Warren Buffett was into promoting abortion.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that now that they've looked at the book. Yes, who knew that nice old Warren is the biggest abortion funder in America? And again, you're quite right to point out he doesn't write a check off his personal checkbook. He writes a check off the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, right? A lot of the biggest billionaires in America have the same last name, Foundation.
So it's just my foundation gives to your foundation, but then I can kind of keep my hands clean because it's running through the shadow organization to support abortion, and no one will really know I did it. Is that what we're getting at here?
I think it's partly that, and partly that, again, the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation probably doesn't have a bunch of web designers and a bunch of Facebook ad buyers and, yada, yada, right?
Okay, so it gets them the efficiencies of it plus a little bit of cover to maybe hide some of their political activity.
Exactly.
All right, speaking of political activity, one of the things that was so interesting was all the connections that Arabella and its web of folks have with the establishment Democratic Party. You mentioned in one of them, Ron Klain, super lawyer Mark Elias. Walk us through that, how all of these connections exist.
Sure. And by the way, of course, that's one of the first bits of evidence when Arabella gets in the limelight at all, it hates it.
Yes.
And it claims, we don't run those nonprofits. Those nonprofits are our clients and they dictate what we do. And of course, Sean, how many companies do you know, Sean, that created their own clients, right? It's a little different. But anyway, one of the other beautiful bits of evidence is Mark Elias. Mark Elias is the Democrats' super lawyer, right? Now, admittedly, his star is tarnished a bit lately. He's lost some cases. He's a big mouth on Twitter, but not so good in the courtroom. Sad to say, I weep for him, but he still is quite the Democrat powerhouse, and he certainly has been quite the Democrat powerhouse. And he is it's a two-faced thing here. He is their attorney, which makes the idea that they are nonpartisan utterly laughable, right? I mean, Mark Elias literally tweets out, if you're not about winning elections for Democrats, we are not the law firm for you, right? It does not pass the laugh test to pretend that anybody with him as their lawyer is a nonpartisan outfit. But here's the flip side. Arabella services him, his democracy docket. That's capital D now, Sean. His democracy docket C3 is a pop-up group from an Arabella C3. And his democracy docket action fund is a pop-up C4 entity at a different Arabella nonprofit, umbrella nonprofit, right? So it's quite the fun world. And then again, this Molly McCusick, longtime Democrat operative. We have a whole separate report. It's not even in this book, but I think you'd be fascinated by it. In the 2020 election, over $120 million from mostly C3 money sources like private foundations and donor-advised funds got put into a web of nonprofits, C3 charity nonprofits, to micro-target voter registration for the right demographics to elect Democrats. Well, in that, we have a whole big report on that, 30, 40 pages, called How Charities Win Elections, which, of course, is illegal. Charities are not supposed to be winning elections. But the report begins with an email that Molly McCusick, head of the Wyss Foundation and Wyss's C4, wrote to John Podesta. You may have heard of him, Sean.
I have.
They wrote to John Podesta in 2015, and it's the whole plan for how to have this massive C3 voter registration campaign, and it's from McCusick at her Wyss Foundation email. How's that? To John Podesta, who was then, of course, the all but formally announced head of the Clinton campaign. And by the way, Sean, these are not wimpy or lazy people. It was how to do it for the 2016 campaign to elect Hillary in the first place, and how to do it in the 2020 campaign to get her reelected.
All right. I've been telling you this for weeks. If you are looking for the most unique, meaningful gift for someone, the folks at Paint Your Life have got you covered. And I'm going to help you even more, because I know when I'm going to a wedding or I've got a birthday coming up, you're always like, what's the perfect gift for them? The perfect gift is come up with a picture. Now, this is what I did. I used a picture of me. You don't need to obviously use a picture of me, although you're welcome to do that. But they can take a single picture, multiple pictures. It could be people that you want to get together in a compilation painting. And the people at Paint Your Life, when you text Spicer to 87204 in a very quick, efficient process, will show you how to upload your photos. And then you get to pick the kind of painting that you want. So it could be watercolor, charcoal, acrylic, you name it. You pick your frame and then you choose your artist. And as the artist renders the painting, they send videos to you for your approval, 100% guarantee. But the cool part is you really make just an unbelievable, meaningful gift for somebody. So think about that family get together, that special family person, that wedding, whatever it is, birthday. You will have a gift that nobody else will give. And the best part is the folks at Paint Your Life, for the viewers of the show, have an unbelievable deal. You get 20% off and free shipping. And like I said, when you text Spicer to 87204, it could not be an easier process. Just try it. Try it. I played around with this. It is so cool what you can do, and you will not disappoint. Remember that message and data rates do apply. I know one of the things that you brought up was that there are people in the media who will try to make some equivalency between what these guys are doing and the Koch network. And you dispel that for a lot of reasons. Can you explain that to the viewers?
Sure. First of all, Kochs aren't doing the same kind of billions of dollars a cycle work. That is to say, they're not as big. Second of all, this relates to what you're talking to just now. Arabella is joined at the hip with the Democratic Party. The Kochs, of course, since around 2015, 2016, as the Trump faction in the GOP was rising, they've pulled back from as much political engagement, and they certainly are not joined at the hip with the Republican Party that, whether you like it or not, is certainly Trump's party.
I've loved this subject, which is why I was so excited for your book. And over the last couple of years, as I talk to people about like George Soros and what he's funding and Arabella Advisors, you almost get conversations that go something like this, where I'll say, gosh, I know you're an expert in this kind of stuff. I'd love to get your perspective. They're like, I can't talk about it publicly. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't talk about it publicly? People are afraid to expose this because they feel that there will be repercussions. Is that a fair assessment of the landscape right now, that people are truly afraid of going after these guys?
I have literally heard congressional staffers say, oh, my boss can't criticize Soros. He'll drop a money bomb in our next election. And that's the scary part about this, is that when I saw your book, I was like, oh my God, he went there. Because I felt like the conversations that I've had between my time at the RNC and going forward, where I'd say, how are we not exposing this? People would all get excited, and then it would almost like they'd come back to me and be like, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to help you with that. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, we dug into this a little, and we, unfortunately, we've been told that, these will be the repercussions. What is the role of George Soros in all of this? Well, the way I typically put it is George Soros is every bit as bad as you think he is. However, it is very important to understand the left has a lot of Soroses. Pierre Omidyar, another billionaire, eBay fortune, right? The main funder of all the Never Trump work. And actually sometimes some supposedly Republican, like Orrin Cass's group, which generally considered Republican, gets good Omidyar money. The Warren Buffett, which is definitely something most people don't appreciate, is a huge abortion supporter. Abortion, of course, is now the Democrats' number one political lever, they think. The
By the
Hansjörg
way, you brought this up. I just
on
want to
and
put
on.
context on this because I'll give people a reference. This is on page 78 of the book. Warren Buffett, when you talk about him being the largest funder, $4.7 billion is what you write in the book. $4.7 billion. I had no clue that we were talking that he was a big funder of this, but to that tune, $4.7 billion.
Yeah, it's sad. And I'm sure I'm forgetting. I know I'm forgetting a couple of. Reid Hoffman, and again, the list of lefty billionaires goes on and on. And don't forget those ones with that same last name, foundation. I almost never find a group that gets money from Soros that does not also get money from the Ford Foundation. Ford is easily as bad as Soros.
Should people, when they now, like, I'll go out and I'll look on maybe a theater building or something, right? And it'll say donations made possible by, or even on PBS. One of the things is always like the Ford Foundation, the Bill and Melinda. Is this a one-off for them, or is this a major part of their giving?
Well, it's multiple things, right? So on the one hand, it's just prestige. Like, it's crystal clear that when the Gates Foundation was set up, it was just a PR operation. They want to get better press for themselves. So obviously people like getting good press, whether they're an institution like Ford or Bill Gates. But the other thing is, of course, when you're giving money like that, you are over time going to have powerful influence, at least in the sense of what you just were talking about, silencing of things, right? I worked at a conservative nonprofit back in the 2000s, and the Ford Foundation was worried because there was a new head of it who's probably going to be a little more, militantly conservative. They immediately said, "We'll give you $500,000. And I'm very proud of my boss. He said, "No, not a penny."
Right. And that's what I was talking about. They know how to buy off their opponents. And that's part of what I was saying before. Is you mentioned the money bomb being dropped. It's not just the money bomb. They'll go after you or they'll buy you off. And that's why I think you see a lot of people balking at, when it comes to this. You've referred to this pyramid a few times. We talk about the top being the Arabella advisors. You mentioned 4 major funds. Can you walk through them and the differences that they have sort of in the middle of the pyramid?
Sure. The biggest one, good for about $1 billion a year on its own, is the New Venture Fund.
Okay.
The other thing about the New Venture Fund is it is actually the paymaster for all the other half dozen entities out there like that, run by Arabella. The next one that's probably should be mentioned is the 1630 Fund. That is the biggest of the 501c4s. New Venture is a C3 charity. 1630 is a C4 political nonprofit. Now, it has been for a number of cycles one of the biggest, just plain old fighting in congressional races, House and Senate races. Even Politico, for instance, will write up about how 1630 is this dark money powerhouse for the Democratic Party. Then you have another C4 would be the North Fund.
Yes.
North Fund mostly funds in state ballot initiatives, right? It's typically one of the top ballot initiative funders for any one of those, like those Ohio ones on abortion, things like that are really politically influential, powerful processes.
How much? There's one thing in here. I was trying to look through my notes as we talked, because there was one media organization that you talk about, and I'm having a hard time finding it right now. How much are these guys getting into the media space where they're funding nonprofits that are helping the media? I think it was states or something.
There's two strings that Arabella's helped create. Syndicates, whatever you want to call them. States Newsroom and Courier Newsroom. Yeah, and there, instead of having, instead of keep Iowans healthy, right? they'll have something like, the Boise Sentinel, right? And in fact,
Love
it's
the Boise
really,
Sentinel. Wait till you comics in that are fantastic.
yeah. Well, and of course, what it really is, talking points for whoever's running in Iowa, or maybe something like abortion stuff or some other,
But
hot
the
button
media
issue.
accepts them, right? I mean, that's the beauty, is that these guys are funding the media, and the mainstream legacy left-wing media are treating them like colleagues and peers.
Exactly. Not Breitbart, not the Federalist, not Fox News. Those are all monsters. But these things, yeah, well, sure.
I think the other thing to understand, and again, I'll leave it to the book, but I just want to, you guys have a great thing on how Demand Justice went after Trump nominees, and they had just popped up in the conversation you're having with colleagues. I mean, I can't do it justice in the show right now because I think it would go too quick. But one of the things that I found fascinating is we've talked a lot on this show about women's sports and protecting women's sports. And it's this group in this network that is going after women's sports and destroying it.
Yes, that would be Governing for Impact. Now,
Governing for Impact.
Yeah. That would be purely Soros funded, by the way. It was sort of a pet project of the head of his private foundation. And again, Sean, talk about these people not being lazy or dumb. They started that in 2019, 2 years before folks actually get sworn into the new administration. And they didn't do it, at, East Jesus Law School. They did it at Harvard Law School, getting Harvard law types to be plotting the very complicated, sophisticated strategies that you need in order to overturn regulations like Betsy DeVos's sane Title IX Department of Education regulation. They were already working to flip it so that nope, you can't keep boys out of girls' sports.
There's an entire section in here about voting and elections and the influence that they're having. Let me read a section here. It says, by now, most Americans know that big philanthropy exercised significant influence over the 2020 election. We're talking Zuck bucks, et cetera, like this. In numerous groundbreaking reports, CRC, that's your group, revealed how billionaire and left-wing mega group donor Mark Zuckerberg channeled $350 million through a sleepy Chicago nonprofit, the Center for Tech and Civic Life. That sounds so nice. To thousands of local election officials. These so-called Zuck bucks had the expected effect of boosting the turnout for Democratic nominee Joe Biden in battleground states under the guise of COVID-19 relief, a fact that has even appeared in the New York Times. What isn't well known about CTCL's election meddling is the close involvement of Arabella advisors. That's page 64. What's the close connection?
Well, Sean, here's this is one of those frustrating things. You talk about how the 990s get, the IRS forms get filed, but they get filed typically about a year later, right?
Right.
Now, I can remember arguing with reporters, mainstream reporters, about whether the Zuck bucks was really just like, we're going to help people buy masks and plexiglass, or is it a Democrat Party turnout operation, right? And they were, very skeptical. This was a partisan operation. Well, a year after the election, we discover, when Arabella releasing the forms at the very last legal second you can do it, a year later says, oh yeah, that new venture fund, our biggest C3, we put 25 million into that Center for Tech and Civic Life that got most of Zuckerberg's bucks. Now, if I had known that at the time, I'm confident I would have been able to persuade the New York Times and people like that. This is absolutely a partisan operation, because at this point, everybody knows Arabella's partisan.
So what should we be worried about as we head into 2024 that they might be doing or funding?
Well, see, here's the thing. That Center for Tech and Civic Life, I hate to say, it's still around. Now, 28 states ban the kind of Zuckbuck funding where they just write a check to a local election official. So they're smart and they're not lazy. They have found ways to try to get around that. Oh, we'll give you credits. We're not writing you a check. We'll give you credits for your local Department of Elections to help you, and we'll give you improvement plans. Sean, don't you want an improvement plan for your office there? And again, they focus on the big Democrat cities where you have the big turnout for their preferred political party. Well, guess what? They in the credits that they're handing out, those credits can be spent at the Center for Tech and Civic Life's partners, which include not one, but 2 Arabella fake groups.
So when I hear people say that we've gotten rid of Zuck Bucks, is that accurate or no?
We've got rid of Zuckbucks 1.0, which was writing the checks to the local officials, but not Zuckbucks 2.0, which is all these other flim-flam things that Arabella continues to be mixed up in.
I mean, this is the beauty of the book, by the way, folks, is that we're exposing what's really happening to the extent possible. And I think that's important because we're hearing a lot. So all they're doing is just morphing themselves into another group. So you get rid of Zuckbucks, you just have Zucky Bucks or something.
Well, the Center for Tech, they rebranded themselves. I mean, they just concocted a project, but it's a rebranding, right? Alliance for Election Excellence. Now, you're not opposed to that, are you?
God, I love that one. Alliance for Election. It sounds so good. You end the book by talking about how we can counter this. And there's some legislative discussion in there. But the first thing that came to my mind is, do we need to get rid of them or do we need to compete with them?
Well,
or can we compete with them?
Well, the left is the party of the rich. So it may be hard to raise quite as much money as they, but, it may be possible to spend it better. Plus, they do have you got to feel sorry for them, Sean. 3/4 of Americans agree with at least 3/4 of what you think, right? So these guys have to spend all these billions pushing uphill against people's actual opinions. The numbers, the percentage of Americans who want men and women's sports, that's pathetically small.
Yeah, but see,
right?
what they do, I think what they've done a brilliant job in a lot of these things, it goes back to the Zuckbucks. It's, do you want help? And everyone goes, sure, I'd like help. They don't paint it as we're going to put men in women's sports. They paint it as like a fairness thing. And everyone's like, oh, I'm for fairness. And no one realizes what they're actually buying into. That's the beauty of what the left does, is they're selling you snake oil. And do you want fair elections? Oh, I love fair elections. Do you want a better environment? I'd love a better environment. And then it's like, here's what you just bought. And it's like it's like a timeshare. You can't get rid of it now.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. But having said that, this is another thing that we should be happy about. And thank you for this education you're doing. Because Arabella's a Wizard of Oz operation, right?
Yeah.
And when you first see the wizard, big and scary and all this. But then when the little dog pulls the curtain back and you see, well, it's just some guy at a microphone.
It's just Eric Kessler.
Yeah, it's not as intimidating. A lot of that power just evaporated.
Why isn't Eric Kessler more of a household name?
Well, we're lucky that the big places, the New York Times and Politico and whatnot are just barely beginning to talk about Arabella in the last couple of years. I suspect because of how much we banged the drum about it at Capital Research Center. So, give them time, Sean. They're never going to want to hurt their lefty friends is part of the problem.
I'm just fascinated that somebody who's been that influential and is raising that much money has kept a low profile. It's antithetical to so much of what happens in DC, where everyone wants credit. This guy, I'll give him at least some credit for staying underneath the radar to the extent that he has. Maybe it's the folks in the media covering for him. But listen, Scott, I can't tell you, like I said, this book has been a breath of fresh air. It really gives insight, and we haven't even really scratched the surface, because each chapter, when you read it, really gives people an understanding of the impact that these folks, these groups, these foundations are really having.
Well, thank you, Sean. I think it's a pretty fascinating story.
Okay. Folks, again, the book is called Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. It is eye-opening, it is jaw-dropping, and it is something that you should understand as we head into the election, because this is what we're up against. And as Scott has stated so eloquently, we don't have a competing entity. So you need to know what we're up against, and more importantly, be able to call it out when we see it. Anyway, another great show on tap for tomorrow. Please remember to subscribe, share, tell everyone about it. This is one of those ones that you want to bookmark and share with folks. So thanks for subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeart. iTunes, I don't care where, but bookmark it, share it. Make sure everyone that you know knows we're up against. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.